Hey, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really happy and thrilled to have as my guest Michael Tubach, who's a partner at O'Melveny. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be on.
So, Michael, let me start by asking you, you're obviously an accomplished trial lawyer. What made you decide to go to law school in the first place?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, basically. I love to argue. I love the art of arguing. I love to figure things out and try to persuade people of it. The only question for me early on in my career is whether I was going to go to law school or whether I was going to go try and be a musician professionally. And so once that hurdle was cleared, then my path was clear.
Well, what tipped it over for you? What helped you make that decision?
Basically, I wasn't talented enough as a musician to make it as a living. I love music. I was a music major, music econ double major in college. But realized I had neither the extreme talent required to make a living at music, nor did I think I loved it enough to spend 8 hours a day sitting at a piano practicing. So then that hurdle out of the way, my path was clear.
Yeah. Do you still play a little bit of music today, though?
Oh yeah, I play quite a bit. Yeah. No, I turned 50. When I turned 50 a few years ago now, I gave a concert. I rented out the Berkeley Faculty Club and gave a concert for 110 people invited and had a dinner and stuff. It was great fun.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, so you went to law school. Did you like it as much as you thought? I mean, it was like a duck to water. What'd you think?
It was a duck to water. I loved law school. I just loved the drama of it. I loved learning about stuff. I was a true law geek in law school. We belonged to I belonged to a small study group where we got together every week and we exchanged outlines, and it was clearly the geeks study group.
Did you do anything in high school, like debate or anything that was sort of similar to that kind of stuff, or gave you a sense of what law school would be like? No?
Absolutely nothing. I mean, in fact, the closest I got to anything in the law was in college. I took a couple of legal studies courses and I did terribly. So I don't know what that tells you, but it certainly wasn't indicative of law school. And I guess the only thing that prepared me for law school really was sitting around the dinner table with my parents arguing all the time about stuff. So.
Your parents were not lawyers, though.
Oh, no, I'm the first lawyer, I think, ever in my family.
Oh, interesting. So then how did you pick the practice that you are in? How did that happen? Tell me what happened after you graduated from law school.
Yeah, so I graduated from law school in '89. I went to Berkeley. Then I clerked for a year in DC for Judge Williams, who was just a terrific and incredible judge. And then I worked at the SG's office for a year, something called the Bristow Fellowship now. And that was obviously, Ken Starr was the Solicitor General. John Roberts was one of the political deputies. I mean, just an incredible collection of lawyers, but it was all appellate, obviously all appellate stuff.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to do trial court work. And so I joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., which was just a great experience. The criminal law is just, I do both. I do a lot of civil stuff. I do a lot of criminal stuff, but there's just something about that sort of idea of someone maybe having committed a crime and the possibility of going to jail that just really sharpens the issues, I think.
How long were you at the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Almost 6 years.
Okay, and you must have tried what? Dozens of cases, hundreds of cases?
No, I tried maybe over 30.
Okay.
And at that time, this was a great time to be an AUSA in D.C. because there's no local prosecutor in D.C. So you do both the local stuff and the federal stuff. And back in those days, virtually every misdemeanor was jury demandable. Wow. So, a guy with, one rock of crack cocaine would get a jury trial. And so I tried my first 10 trials. I'm not sure anybody cared if I won or lost, including the defendants half the time. Some were just happy to be in a warm place for a while, had obvious, drug issues and needed treatment. So
I take it you really like trying cases. You really like being in front of a jury, I'm going to guess.
It's incredibly fun. I mean, I just got done doing 3 trials in Denver in a row, the same case. So we can talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, no, it was incredibly, it's just high drama to be in front of a jury. High drama.
So what made you decide to go back to private practice? Obviously, you didn't do that forever. You're in private practice now. What made you decide to switch back or switch into it?
Well, I'd been a prosecutor for a number of years and had tried a bunch of cases, and I really saw that there were some very good what we called lifers in the U.S. Attorney's Office, folks who'd been there forever, and they're incredibly dedicated, hardworking, public servants. And then there were some that just weren't really that way, and I wanted to try something new and different. I feel like I'd done the U.S. Attorney's Office thing. I really enjoyed it. It's an incredible amount of sort of power and responsibility to have over people's lives, and to exercise that responsibly and with good judgment. That really meant a lot to me. But I'd done that, and so I wanted to try something new. And at that point, we had one child had already been born. We were trying to have another child, so that giant sucking sound, as Ross Perot would say, of the grandparents pulling us back to the Bay Area is part of what brought us back here.
Huh. And so how was the transition into private practice? I mean, what did you think? How did you like it?
I thought it was going to be much more difficult than it was. I mean, I was a prosecutor, tried and true. I believed in the mission. I still believe in that mission. But transferring over to the defense side was actually remarkably easy. I mean, there are very few people in this world who are just incorrigibly evil people, and who most people would say they don't even deserve a defense lawyer, and everyone's got some angle. I mean, I've represented people who are obviously guilty, and then you don't fight on facts, you fight on sentencing, right? Or and so it was actually a remarkably easy transition. There was not a case where I felt like, geez, I really should not be doing this. This is wrong somehow.
What is your mix of criminal and civil now, or how has it evolved?
I'd probably say maybe 50-50. It's hard to tell because I do a lot of antitrust work. That's most of what I do now.
Oh, I see.
And antitrust often starts with a criminal investigation. And then if that becomes public, either through charges being filed or let's say a public disclosure, the company has to publicly disclose it's being investigated. Then there are often civil lawsuits that get filed that sort of grow out of that criminal investigation.
I see.
So it's a little hard to separate those.
How do you compare antitrust with doing criminal work? Or I mean, white collar? I assume you're prosecuting mostly white collar kind of criminals and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but
it's interesting. Antitrust is a very insular group. In a way, there aren't that many white-collar antitrust criminal lawyers. There are. I mean, there are plenty, but it isn't like there are thousands. They're like I've been doing this long enough now that I basically know everyone in this space, and it's a nice community. And antitrust cases, what's so interesting about them, and it's very different from other kinds of crime, alleged crime, is the line between what's legal and what's not legal is very thin, very thin. So in a straight out sort of price fixing investigation where the allegations that you have an agreement with your competitor, it's perfectly legal for you to call your competitor and ask him for pricing information and for him to give you pricing information. That's not a crime, but if you have an agreement, then it's a crime. And so, of course, DOJ often takes the position, well, you guys were exchanging pricing information, therefore you had an implicit agreement to increase prices. So that's a really thin line to draw. So that's in some ways what distinguishes antitrust criminal work from other kinds of crimes. If you're engaging in a Ponzi scheme, there can be factual issues about that too, but by and large, if you're in a Ponzi scheme, or you're committing bank fraud, okay, that's usually pretty straightforward.
Do you also do a lot of monopoly type antitrust stuff, or not so much?
I haven't done as much. I've done some of it. That's obviously the hot issue now.
Yeah, right.
We're probably, this is probably the biggest flexion point in antitrust law in the last 40 years.
Yeah, right.
Where really there's this sense that big is not good.
Yeah.
And that's never been the sort of policy, if you call it, of antitrust law, at least not in the last few decades.
Yeah, totally.
Where there are even Supreme Court cases saying, look, the point of competition is to eventually succeed, which makes you a monopolist. Like that in some ways almost monopoly is the end goal of successful competition.
Right.
And that's really changing.
But doesn't that also require, I did a little bit of antitrust. I was an IP lawyer, so, kind of touches upon antitrust. But,
Sure.
there's a lot of economics that you got to really understand about, what constitutes a monopoly and whether you have market share. And I mean, I remember talking to antitrust lawyers, a lot of, economics and stuff had to come into play, or really deep understanding of the business, I thought, the nuances of the markets and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. No, for sure. You need to have a relevant market to decide whether or not someone's monopolized it. And how do you decide whether something's a relevant market?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's going to have different views of that. And
exactly.
Especially in today's times where there's so much changing so quickly. I mean, 5 years ago, had anyone heard of TikTok?
Yeah, right.
Right. So that's just that's the kind of work that is why people hire economists. We had an economist testify at our price fixing trial just recently. In a criminal case where supposedly the only thing is whether there's an agreement.
So what about white collar, just straight up white collar criminal? Do you still do a fair amount of that stuff, or not so much anymore these days?
I do white collar criminal stuff as well. I mean, I did a case involving goods being exported to Iran in violation of the embargo. I did a trade secrets case recently. So I definitely do other work. I'd say the bread and butter of what I do is antitrust.
So now the transition to defense, I mean, do you miss some of the excitement of being the prosecutor? You're sort of, I always think of defense trial lawyers more playing goalie, you're stalling and, that sort of thing, as opposed to, that's the way that was sort of my view of defense lawyers.
Well, let me rejigger that a little bit. No, what I miss is that, like, when I was a prosecutor, people returned my calls immediately. Because you've got all the power, and the deck is really stacked in favor of the government. They have a lot of power. They've got basically unlimited investigative capacity with a grand jury. And the defense, on the criminal side, you have no right to depositions. Your right to access documents and information that the government has is, better than it's been in the past, but still not at all like civil discovery, where by the time you're going to trial in a civil case, everything basically that anyone is going to say, and that's just not true in a criminal case. But there's lots of drama on the defense side. I mean, that's part of what makes criminal cases so interesting, and frankly, civil cases too. I mean, just any case you have, there's human drama involved. That's why I love being a litigator.
How often do you get to go to trial now in private practice?
Not as much as I'd like. I mean, I've been to trial 3 times since October.
Oh, wow.
Which is this is this unicorn case that we had in Denver that involved alleged price fixing of chicken.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Broiler chickens. Like, I represented the former CEO of a company called Pilgrim's Pride, which is the second biggest chicken producer in the country. And he, along with 9 others, were indicted for price fixing. And it went to trial and this was big. This sort of like fixing the price of chicken sold to KFC,
right?
Popeyes, big contract. And the case went to trial in October. There were 10 defendants, and the jury hung as to all 10 defendants.
Wow.
So the DOJ says, we're going to try this thing again.
Okay.
Tried it again in February, hung jury, all 10 defendants the second time. DOJ stands up immediately after the second mistrial, and says, we're going to try this thing a third time.
Wow.
And the judge says, okay, well, if you want to do that, what I would like is for the Assistant Attorney General of the Antitrust Division to appear in my courtroom in a week and explain to me why that's an appropriate thing to do.
Okay.
And he did. Showed up eventually. I think he had COVID or something, so it came like 2 weeks later.
Right.
He shows up and says, we believe in this case as strongly as the day we charged it. And the judge can't stop them from trying it again. Yeah, what he did say, though, is, isn't that just the triumph of hope over experience, counsel? This was Judge Brimmer. He was just awesome. He's my favorite judge to try cases in front of. He was just great. And I don't say that because he ruled in our favor. He ruled against us a lot.
Yeah, okay.
But he was just.
So what happened? I'm waiting with bated breath. What happened in the third trial?
I'm drawing this out.
You're getting to it. Okay, you're a trial lawyer, of course. You're drawing it out, of course.
So what the government did is dismiss 5 of the defendants, and went to trial against 5 remaining defendants. And of course, the case was United States versus Jason Penn et al. And we represented Jason Penn. We are not one of the et al. So we are definitely among the 5 who stuck around. Went to trial again in June, and this time was not guilty, all 5 defendants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did they basically put on the exact same case just to a different jury, or did they must have changed it up a little bit, right? I mean, you can't tell me they just try. What's that definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result? I mean, was that essentially what happened?
The triumph of hope over experience.
The triumph of hope, yeah.
Well, no, what they did is the first 2 trials were pretty similar, although in the first trial, they only had one cooperator, like in what they called a conspiracy insider. The second time, they brought in a second guy they said was a conspiracy insider. That did not go well for them. And then the third time, they dumped him, and they simplified their case. They really did. Before, it was sort of like, it was just this sprawling 7-year conspiracy, and what I called in my, I think it was my opening or my closing one, I called it like a yard sale of allegations. It's like the stuff just strewn out on the lawn, and let's see if anybody buys anything. In the third trial, they really pared it down, and even though they still introduced a lot of sort of extraneous stuff about communications, they really focused mostly on sales to KFC in this one particular, it's one sort of bid cycle, maybe two bid cycles is fair. And what that actually did, though, interestingly, is once you'd sort of stripped away all of the underbrush, it made it much more clear just how weak their case was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I really think so. Because then it was basically, okay, so that's all you got? That's what you got? Right. Whereas before, with 10 defendants and their lawyers and all the government lawyers, and everyone's in suits and masks, or masks all 3 trials. It's hard for a jury not to think, well, there's got to be something there. I mean, the federal government charged 10 people.
Why did they get rid of 5 defendants? Also to try to simplify things? Is that what the reasoning was?
I think so, yeah. And the evidence against those 5 was really quite weak.
I see. So in the third trial, did you think, were you thinking, wow, this is really going to go our way, or did you think it was going to get a hung jury again, or what was your thinking after twice doing it?
I don't know. I was certainly, obviously hoping for a not guilty, but you just never know. I mean, unfortunately, it's not like when you're teaching. I don't know if you've ever taught, but when you're teaching, it's sort of like a jury trial, except you get to talk to the jury and make them talk to you, right? Whereas in jury, you really don't get you don't get to ask them, hey, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? What do you think? Everyone's got their ideas and their views, and people are checking out the jury saying, well, she really liked this thing. This person didn't like that. But at the end of the day, it's all just a bunch of guesswork, and then we thought the case went in pretty well. And fundamentally, the government's case couldn't change because they had 2 previous trials where their witnesses had testified. So it's not like they could just come in with some completely new theory. So we knew where it was, but they brought in new lawyers for the third trial.
Oh, interesting.
And they were very, Kevin Hart and Leslie Wolf, and they both did a very nice job. They're very, sort of good. Like, they really laid out the case as best they could. And I thought they did a nice job. But I think the fact is they just couldn't, as my dad used to say, make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Like, it's like the case is only so good, and that was it.
All right, your favorite case, is that your favorite case or your favorite story, your trial? Tell me, you've obviously been to a lot of trials, you've done a lot of cases. Anything, any story that just leaps out in your mind?
Yeah, that's, right now it's so, it's the primacy recency thing. That's clearly the one that sticks in my mind. We've done so many interesting cases over the years.
Yeah, right.
I represented, along with Dan Buchan, my partner, we represented a guy named Amr Mosen.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just give you like the beginning and the end of the story. He started out, he was the CEO of a company. His company was the plaintiff in a patent lawsuit. And at the very end, he was sentenced to serve 17 years in prison.
Yeah, I know that story. He forged some inventorship documents or something like that, right? To basically make up a date on an invention. I know that case because I was an IP lawyer,
Wow.
and I knew about that guy because we were working with him. And then I remember some story about how like the patent office just happened to look at the declaration and the thing and noticed like, wow, the date is or something like that, and that just cascaded. And then he tried to hire somebody to kill the judge or something like that. I mean, is that
It
the
was
guy?
yeah, that's the guy. It was a
Wow.
crazy case.
Wow.
Well, it all this whole notebook thing came out because he was the plaintiff. He was the inventor.
Yeah, right. He
And
was
so he
trying to
was trying to get
establish
an
it. Yeah,
earlier date
right.
of
Yeah,
invention.
yeah,
You know what that
exactly.
means.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And so then the plaintiff's lawyers were digging into this, and then they wanted to examine the original notebook, and then someone broke into his
Oh
car
yeah.
and stole his notebook, and
Yeah, right.
it just went from bad to worse. And we didn't get brought in until he had testified, I think, 7 times in the civil case about all these various things, and then the company lawyers thought, maybe this guy needs his own lawyer. So
Do you
then
represent the company or him individually?
we represented him personally,
Oh wow.
but
Okay.
only for a reasonably short time. We basically, when it got to a sanctions hearing in front of Judge Alsop, which is not the judge you would pick in the Northern District. Not that I'd pick any of them, but he'd be at the top of the list of someone you wouldn't want to appear of in terms of being accused of having forged evidence in a case in front of him. We got and Dan, said he's going to take the fifth.
Okay. Yeah.
And Judge Alsop said, I find he's waived by all of his prior testimony, where there was a silence as Dan asked, well, would the court stay its ruling while we seek immediate relief from the Ninth Circuit?
Wow.
And there was this long pause, and finally Alsop thankfully said, yes, I will give you that opportunity. He then decided the notebook was, as he put it, a forgery from bark to core.
He's still in jail, right? He's still in jail, I see.
I think he may have just gotten out, actually. His release date is coming up very soon.
Oh,
it was very sad. He was a brilliant man.
Yeah.
Totally. And had started public companies that had gone public and had been a huge success.
I remember that guy. Yeah.
That was just a terrible case.
Interesting.
But it's like the human, like that, what I was saying, the human drama, like that's
totally.
That's pretty remarkable.
Well, Michael, tell me, so you've been a prosecutor, you've been in private practice, you're still a very young man, you played music. What do you see for yourself for the next third of your career? You're very young. What do you see yourself doing something else, or you're going to finish your career like this? You're going to become a musician? What do you see for yourself?
Well, unless my talent has somehow magically increased since my college days, I'm not going to go be a musician. I mean, I still play quite a bit, and I'll always do that. I mean, that's an important part of who I am, really. No, I think I'm going to continue to do what I do. I love doing this. I mean, I love where I am. I love the pay is, as you know, absurdly good. The lawyers are incredibly smart and interesting. And the cases are great. Like, what is there not to love? I love this job.
Well, it's interesting. I do a lot of these interviews. I talk to lawyers every day in my new profession, and I can always tell right away when somebody really enjoys what they do. And I can tell within like 30 seconds. It's interesting. And I can tell that from people. Obviously, it's the case. So and I always enjoy talking to people who really love what they do. I mean, there's nothing more energizing in my mind. So.
Right, because you spend a lot of your waking hours
totally
working. If you don't like, especially as a lawyer, this is not a 9-to-5 job.
Totally.
By any stretch.
You don't love
what you're doing, man. Go do something else.
Totally.
And I saw this so I was the managing partner of the San Francisco office at MLB during the downturn in 08, 09. And this is the first and only time we've ever done a layoff in our 125-year history. It was remarkable. And what I saw was and what was terrible is that people were getting laid off. They had done nothing wrong. It wasn't that they were terrible lawyers. It just, the work wasn't there. And we had hired, as you know, the sort of hiring, the delay in when you have summer programs and then end up having people join you for full-time jobs is really long. And so all the law firms had this big pipeline of people from now. Anyway, the point of this is, those people got laid off. Some of them just left the law altogether. Like, it wasn't really what they wanted to do. One of them started a yoga company because she really wanted to do that. One person like walked that trail, the Pacific Coast Trail, all the way down to like Tierra del Fuego, wherever it is. Just stuff that they were, for whatever reason, the golden handcuffs or just the inertia of life had kept them where they were. But once sort of freed from that, then they were off doing all these other things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, Michael, it's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time out of your busy day. If you do decide to do anything different, or you want to come back and talk about classical piano or music, I'd love to have you back again.
Absolutely. Anytime you want.
This is Richard Hsu and Michael Tubach. Thanks.